What's going on, freaks and friends? Filthy Dan coming at you for the fourth entry of the John Carpenter review series. We are looking at Someone's Watching Me, which was technically the third film that he worked on. He did this one before Halloween, but it wasn't released until about a month after Halloween came out. So in a lot of ways, this finds itself serving as sort of a dry run for that. Carpenter had stated that he picked up quite a few techniques from this film that he would carry on into Halloween. Shooting for Halloween started about a month after shooting for Someone's Watching Me was wrapped up. So it's kind of cool to see how those two kind of worked together and sort of helped John Carpenter progress as a filmmaker. This was a TV movie, aired on NBC November 29th, 1978. But this one stars Lauren Hutton, Adrienne Barbeau, David Birney, and Charles Cyphers. The plot for this one follows Leigh, played by Lauren Hutton, who moves into a high-rise called Arkham Tower, which is a Lovecraft sort of homage, no doubt. And she begins to receive these creepy phone calls and these exotic gifts of sorts from a company that simply does not exist. And she ultimately learns that there's somebody watching her from the adjacent building, the Blake Tower, which is another high-rise just across the way there. And we ultimately see her fighting back against her stalker. It's a fun little game of cat and mouse and a perfect little example of tension by John Carpenter. Leigh is a great lead character, and we see right off the bat that she is not necessarily a badass. This does come later, but we do see her to be a real go-getter. The sort of way that she kind of not really weasels her way into getting the interview for the apartment, but she kind of tricks the guy by coming up with this story about a husband who has a job out there and a sick mother. And when she's like, okay, you know what, let's cancel this ruse, this is what's really going on. I'm just a chick who's single, and I go to work, take showers, yada yada. So the way she kind of does that is a real fun way to meet her. We see that she's ambitious. When she realizes that she is being stalked, she's not at all willing to back down and ultimately letting the stalker win. She's really a forward kind of thinker where and I don't even know if forward thinking is the right word, but she's not going to lay back and take no crap from this guy. She's really on her way to try and, sort of rise above everything. And she shows throughout the film. She's not a character to be taken lightly. She's going to kick ass, and she's not going to let her ass get kicked. So that's, again, really appreciable. One thing I do like is the little bits throughout the film where she talks to herself, like when she's on her way to go get the job interview for this directing at a TV station, being a TV director. Just the way she's kind of talking herself through the interview is fun, and there's a few other parts where she's alone in her apartment where she'll be talking to herself. It's just fun little character moments like that. And we get Sophie, who's played by Adrienne Barbeau. She's a pretty cool secondary character, sort of the perfect best friend of the protagonist type of character. And I think perfectly played by Adrienne Barbeau. I just don't feel that her character was given too much development. Sure, they have the one character attribute where she's a lesbian in the workplace, which, sure, for 1978 was super progressive, but I didn't feel that Adrienne Barbeau really had a lot to do in this film. We'll see more of her in the weeks to come. We're looking at Stevie Wayne in the Fog, where she is a little more developed as a character and has more to do, I feel. We also have Paul, played by, again, the actor's name here, David Birney. And Paul is a character who I think is pretty easy to forget, especially after you finish watching the film. But he's the love interest for Leigh, and I know when we meet him, he's at a bar, and the lighting he's introduced in is sort of a gloomy lighting, and he kind of comes off as a shady guy. But throughout the film, we see, oh no, he's not shady. He's actually a good guy. He's someone we want on our side. And the last character I really want to talk about before we move on is Charles Cyphers, playing the sort of skeptical detective, whose name is Gary Hunt. Why does that sound so familiar? Anyway, he's pretty solid in his role, being, again, sort of that hard-lined, skeptical detective authority figure. But I do have to say he does suffer from a severe case of Cipher-citis, which is a condition in which Charles Cyphers is sadly underutilized by John Carpenter. The tension in this, again, I gotta say, is really textbook Carpenter, in where through the first act there's not a whole lot in terms of scares going on, but it has that perfect little build-up where he's slowly building you up, and getting you to that perfect point, and it sort of progresses throughout the second act, third act, and we do get nice little kind of freaky moments, even, where whenever Leigh goes out to the bar after work one day, she meets the love interest, Paul, and he's kind of introduced in this really kind of ominous lighting, and they end up having a good time. He walks her out to her car, and she's like, wait, we didn't exchange numbers, and she goes to get the number for him, and he's gone, nowhere to be seen. But some homeless guy just sort of jump scares her at the car in a way that's absolutely not terrifying. It was low-key pretty freaky. Any of the phone calls, I think, are also pretty great. After the first phone call at her job, she goes home, and, she notices that her door's open. And she goes to call the landlord or the maintenance guy at the apartment, or just somebody down at the front office. I forget completely off the top of my head. But she makes a phone call saying, hey, my door's open. And they're like, oh yeah, our maintenance guy was up there, yada yada. And while she's on the phone with her back turned to the open door, we kind of just see somebody run across in a really comical manner. Of course, it's the stalker in her apartment. And he slams the door, goes to the elevator. That was just a nice little tense scene right there. And there's a whole great deal of tension throughout. I don't want to talk about all of it because in a lot of ways, I want you guys to experience that on your own. Although I'm going to do a great amount of spoilery stuff throughout this video, as I tend to do. One little scene I like too, that's one of the scary scenes, is just the flickering of the lights in her apartment when she's getting phone calls and getting these mysterious gifts, and she just has her lights dimming off and on, off and on. And you kind of wonder, how the hell is that happening? He's got to have control of the lighting somehow. This is terrifying. It's a cool little bit that almost makes you wonder if she's losing her freaking mind. It's a fun bit there. Another really fun bit is also where, I don't know why I'm calling it fun, but where she's having a couple drinks with Adrienne Barbeau's character. Adrienne Barbeau leaves, and the waitress comes over with the bottle of wine and says, hey, the gentleman at the bar bought this for you. And she just turns around, there's nobody there. And we would assume, hey, maybe we're going to get a fake out and it's just Paul. But it's not even that. She asks, what's he look like? And the barmaid waitress gal just responds, he just looked like a man. And that was, I think, kind of freaky in quite a few ways, because it shows that we know as the audience that it was definitely the stalker. It just kind of shows that this guy is sort of a forgettable face in the crowd. That he has that sort of uncanny ability to blend in out in public. I know that doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the film, but I thought it was a cool little thing that might not even really be a factor, but it's something that it kind of puts in my mind, and maybe for some of y'all who have seen it. One thing I do got to say is the photography in this, the cinematography. It's obvious that it's TV movie quality. If you watch the full screen, which I have not watched the full screen version, so I don't have really a whole lot of ground to stand on here. I've watched the widescreen, which is the only way you should watch movies, I think, especially John Carpenter films, because when you have that widescreen, wide angle thing going on, it just, I think it makes the film look a lot better. Full screen cuts off the sides, which is never fun to deal with. It has that obvious TV movie quality. The way it's lit even just has that screams TV movie. And of course it's edited with the perfect stills of blackness for the commercial break. I can't fault it too much for that. But I do feel that the tracking shots in the film are pretty rushed. Like, there's just something about them that, in Halloween or Assault on Precinct 13 even, or any of the Carpenter films going forward, when we get those nice tracking shots, they're slow, meticulous, they get under your skin. And this one, it kind of goes a little quick, and again, I can understand with the constraints of TV, you probably don't have a lot of film that you can shoot on with that, and you have to play within a certain time limitation. And it really has the apparent lacking of the one and only great Dean Cundey. Similarly, the music is another thing that it's not really a complaint, but the music in this is not by John Carpenter. It was by Harry Suckman. I want to say it's Suckman, because otherwise it's Suckman, and that would suck for that to be your name, man. So we'll call him Harry Suckman, Suckman. He does a pretty good enough job here. The music, I think, is more in line with the Bernard Herrmann score, which was the guy who did the music for Psycho and I think a few other Hitchcock films. I don't know off the top of my head. If I remember, maybe I'll throw some of those posters here. I probably won't remember, but if I do, there you go. It does have more of a Herrmann feel than a Carpenter feel, which is okay enough considering that this movie, that kind of goes into our next point here. This movie does have sort of a soft Rear Window flavor, like a really mild hint of the flavorings of Rear Window with the spying on your neighbors from afar, although the roles are kind of reversed a little bit. I think the Bernard Herrmann-esque music does kind of fit that nicely because it plays in with the whole Carpenter loves Hitchcock sort of thing. I'm thinking maybe Herrmann did the music in that, I want to say. I can't guarantee that off the top of my head. I do also like the sort of red herrings that we have at play in this film. We have this guy, Steve, who is a worker at the TV station where Leigh is employed, and he's one of the co-directors. We get him entering the room, like the sort of back office, break room, whatever, shortly after Leigh gets a phone call. Obviously from the stalker, you could tell by the brooding voice. I know where you are. How are you having fun at work? Fucking all that, whatever. I don't know, something about that. Just the way he enters the room, fixing his tie and his coat, making sure he's presentable before he starts hitting on her. It, in a lot of ways, reminds me of the scene in Scream where Sid's in Tatum's room and she gets the call from the killer while Billy's in jail. Obviously, it was Stu calling. Spoilers for Scream. No, there was something about that scene that kind of reminded me of that. And it's like, wow, this guy looks so obvious. And then he starts getting real stalker vibes. But, that's why you shouldn't try to throw your junk around in the workplace there. We also get, again, Paul, who's the love interest sort. I don't know, he doesn't feel like he adds a whole lot to the film aside from being sort of shady when we first see him and a little bit throughout, mostly in the portion of the film where we're first meeting him, but he turns out to be a pretty stand-up guy, I guess. And then we get the glorious Uncle Leo, played by Len Lesser, I think is the actor's name, but Uncle Leo from Seinfeld as Burly Man. So, because Burly Man is not a great character name, we will continue to call him Uncle Leo. Now, as a sort of suspect, I felt that Uncle Leo was a little too obvious because we catch him with almost an hour left in the film, looking through a telescope, being creepy Uncle Leo. We get introduced to him down in the laundry room, and we see that he actually lives in the tower across the street. So it's like, well, why is he over here? It was obviously too obvious. That was overdone, but whatever. But, he turns out to, of course, not be the stalker, but he does turn out to be a creep in his own right. Having sort of tasteless photos that are found at his apartment. We don't see those photos, but we can only assume they are pretty damning. They are enough to get him run out of town. But I do sort of appreciate the little fake out we get there when he does get busted with, although there are like 40 minutes left in the film. But he gets busted and sent out, so he's out of the picture. I do like sort of at the bridging point between Acts 2 and 3 where Leigh goes across to the Blake Tower and uses a walkie-talkie when she goes over there, has Adrienne Barbeau at her apartment, just kind of watching through her telescope, which was sent from the stalker so he can play cat and mouse with her, We kind of get her going over there, and she goes up to the penthouse and she finds the reel-to-reel machine that is recording the phone calls and most of the activity in her apartment. We see the giant silver telescope, which almost looks like this guy is compensating for something. I mean, that telescope is freaking huge. I don't know if it's just the way telescopes were in 78, but we'll leave that up to the psych majors out there. We see her looking over at her apartment like, oh, this is clearly it. I've got a perfect view of my place. And we get through the walkie-talkie, we hear Adrienne Barbeau getting killed. And I don't know, it's funny because Leigh's asking her, oh my god, Sophie, what's going on? It's like, she can't really tell you on the walkie right now what's going on. And I think the only way she can really hear is because of the wiretap over there. That does make a little more sense that way. There was this little subplot in the film where they're talking about how Adrienne Barbeau's character, Sophie, she's getting ready to leave to Fort Worth. And, you know, after she's killed off, Charles Cyphers goes and checks out this apartment across the way. And the stalker, who is now apparently a murderer, he's like without a doubt a murderer now, so we can start calling him the killer. He clears out the penthouse suite over there, takes out the telescope and the reel-to-reel recorder. Like, he totally clears it out and even sees that Sophie's plane ticket is put to use. So it's good stuff covering up his tracks there. That sort of leads us to believe that maybe we get the feeling that perhaps Leigh is sort of imagining all this. Maybe it's all in her head. She's just going crazy. And that's something that Shannon was suspecting when she watched this. It was my second time watching it, her first time watching it. And she's like, this shit's all got to be in her head. And, you know, that could have been a way to take it. But, you know, it sort of felt like it does feel like her as a character that Leigh is losing touch with reality. Maybe that's all that's going on. Perhaps all this has just been a figment of her imagination, and maybe Uncle Leo was the bad guy the whole time. She could just be going through PTSD, sort of, something like that. That wasn't really the case, but I don't know, something about going into Act 3, I feel that the pacing does sort of drag, especially after Uncle Leo's out of the picture. It doesn't add much to this anyway, but I feel like it kind of slogs. We get Leigh going to the house of the maintenance guy, who, real quick, I did forget to say that we find out who the killer most likely is when Leigh and Paul go to they decide to play Nancy Drew, and they go to this one place. I forget exactly what it is off the top of my head, but they find out who has access to the buildings. And the maintenance guy, whose name was Herbert Stiles. He matches the description. He has keys to all the apartments, both buildings on the outside. He can get into the laundry room, play with the lights, so it all makes sense. And while I do like the way they go and play amateur sleuth there, I don't know, I just feel like it was a little bit rushed and a little bit of a last-minute tack on. But again, you're playing within the constraints of TV time. She does go to his house and finds the recording stuff in the telescope, so she's able to say, yeah, it's definitely him. But they can't go to Charles Cypher's Gary Hunt character because it's like, oh, you're breaking and entering again. You haven't let this go. Maybe you're more the problem than him. So, you know, she kind of has to take it more into her own hands, and I like how that's kind of becoming something that has to happen there. I do sort of enjoy the showdown with Leigh and the stalker/killer Stiles, although I find it does come a little short in as far as time goes. But again, you're playing within TV constraints, but otherwise it was a pretty well done scene. You sort of get the playing with the fear of heights there outside the window. So that's a fun little bit. The character falls to his death in a very Disney villain fashion. But that, in a nutshell, is pretty much Someone's Watching Me. I know I kind of got a little all over the place in the last part there, but you know, I'm just trying to make up for the movie's pacing in the third act. Maybe we'll say that. That's what we'll call it. But overall, Someone's Watching Me is an excellent exercise in suspense and tension by John Carpenter. And despite being a TV movie, it doesn't face any shortcomings in the suspense department or the scares department. But again, the Act 3 pacing is something that does hold this movie back for me. Nevertheless, it is a good example of a Carpenter thriller, and I think that it deserves to be seen. Perhaps I think you guys, if you're maybe a little unsure how to go about it, probably stream it. I know you can rent it on YouTube right now, but if you check it out on YouTube and you enjoy it enough, definitely go out, get the Blu-ray, because this is a great version of it. It's Scream Factory. You guys know Scream Factory is something you cannot go wrong with. We got some nice bonus features here. Maybe I'll go through the Carpenter Blu-rays at some point later. I don't want to make this one too long, but it's a good enough film, I think. Again, probably stream it, get it on YouTube, buy the Blu-ray if you liked it enough. I will give Someone's Watching Me 3 oversized telescopes out of 5. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Please be sure to give this video a like, give it that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button if you have not already. We are trying to make that crawl to 300 subscribers. Share this video, do anything you want. Definitely leave a comment down below. Let me know if you guys enjoyed Someone's Watching Me, if you've seen it. Tell me if maybe I've urged you to go check it out. And if you haven't seen it before, try to forget some of the spoilers I threw out there. I will see you guys in the next one.